Well, this is John Black, super chemist. We're here to talk about how many years each state had slavery. As you can see, 29 states, that's 3/5 of our states, never had slavery, not even for 1 second. Okay? And this goes back to the lie about like reparations, you know what I mean? 12.5% of whites back, say in 1800, owned slaves. So if every group procreates at the same rate, right, has kids at the same rate, no matter where you go into the future, those percentages will be the same. So that means today, 12.5% of white people are descendant from slave owners. Okay, but that's if they procreate at the same rate. Rich people, okay, the elites who own the slaves, they don't procreate as fast as poor people. Therefore, you can take that 12.5% down to 10%. Then you take in immigration. You know what I mean? Half the people here are not descended from people that were even around here, during slave times. They came in after 1865 when they got rid of slavery. Okay? So now you take that 10% down to 5%. So that means only 5% of white people in the entire country are descendant from slave owners. 95% are not. And most of them their ancestors weren't even in the country when slavery was legal. Okay, so 95%, only 5% are descendant from slave owners. The same way with the blacks. Only 90% were slaves, 10% were free, right? 3% of them actually owned other blacks, slaves. But if you take into the fact that after immigration, that goes down to like 33%. Only one out of 3 black people in this country are descendant from slaves. Only 1/3. 2/3, 2 out of 3 are not. They either came in after the slavery was abolished, or they were part of that 10% that was never slaves. So let's get on to this. We got 29 states. Here's the list of those states. Okay, well, I hope that's coming in. I don't know if it is or not. But anyways, this part on the left, those are the 29 states that not even 1 second had slavery. Okay, these are the states that were, had slavery. I put them in order, so, a number of years that they had slavery, so it would be a lot easier to check it out. Okay, now remember we had 29, now we have 21 on this list, right? 29 never had, 3/5 never had slavery. Here's the other 2/5. Here's 1/5 and here's 1/5, right? These top up here, this 1/5, they got rid of slavery after 20 to 59 years. In other words, under 60 years. And then these next 11 took 61 to 76 years. So even on these right here, these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, these worst states, 7 states, there was only slavery for 76 years. And I want you to think about it. America was a colony owned by the king, owned by England, okay? They had the slavery, not America, okay? Yes, when America started, it obviously it had all the same rules or whatever. It took time. You couldn't just snap your fingers and change everything, okay? And then we actually, half of the country, which was white, actually died and fought in a civil war to end slavery, okay? We ended slavery. Then we went around to other countries and ended slavery, okay? We weren't happy with ending, same with the UK. They weren't happy ending slavery in their own country. The U.S. and the U.K. went out with ships and made sure that every other country, obviously can't stamp it all out, but they did their best. And they did get rid of most slavery. You know what I mean? So this BS that the U.S. is, and this is a time where everyone had slavery since the beginning of time in every culture, every country. Their Bibles, all your religions, even today, all your Bibles and religions condone and say slavery is okay. And even though all the gods, all the countries, all the governments said we love slavery, as soon as America was built, you know what I mean, they one by one, each state stopped slavery. And as we made states, we wouldn't let them be states unless they said, hey, we're going to start our state out abolishing slavery. That's why we have 29. You know, how can you look at this and say, you know, 400 years in the American colonies had slavery? You can see it ended when America became existing, you know, when it was created. What more do you people want, man? Jesus. I mean, how do you blame America for slavery? They ended slavery. They died and fought a civil war to end it here and everywhere else in the world. So this is crazy that people actually, you know, in the reparations thing, when no one today in this country is actually, you know, descendant from slaves or slave owners. I mean, very few is, you know what I mean? Like, what? And it happened almost 2 centuries ago, not 2 decades, not 2 years, 2 centuries ago almost. 160 years ago it ended. All right? Before you snap your fingers, it's going to be 200 years. 2 centuries almost. 1.6 centuries. So if you were rounding, you know, you would round it up at 1.6. It's 2 centuries. That means you're great. If you're descended from slaves, right? That means your great grandparents were slaves. I mean, if you're really, you know, bent out of shape about slavery from 2 centuries ago, I just have one question to you, okay? Were you close to your great grandfather? I mean, grandparents, were you super close to them, and that's why you care so much about them being slaves 200 years ago? Because I'm Irish, all right? My descendants were slaves for like 800 years. You don't hear me bitching about it. And what's funny is the guy who started slavery, black slavery in the American colonies, was a black man. What was it? Anthony Johnson? He enslaved John Castor. And yes, they had slaves before that, but all the slaves were made slaves because they did something like they raped someone, like a little kid or something, or they killed some bunch of people. That was the only way you can be a slave, is if you did some kind of really horrible crime. This case with Anthony Johnson, it was a civil case, not a criminal case. Okay. And he took John Castor to court, right? A black man. They say no black people had rights, but he's taking people to court. But anyways, he takes them to court. The courts award Anthony Johnson, another black man, as a slave. That was the precedent. Okay, it wasn't like that was a light switch, and as soon as that happened, everyone had a black slave. No, that would set a precedent, a civil court precedent. Without this precedent, there would have been 0 black slavery in the Americas. Okay, where it was a business and it was legal and blah blah blah. You know what I mean? Yeah, wouldn't have happened without that guy, a black man. And keep in mind that there were more white slaves just in northern Africa, not in Africa. I'm saying just in northern Africa, there were more white slaves than there were black slaves in America during the slave days. But where did they get that word from, slave? It comes from Slavs, S-L-A-V-S, just like slaves, but you put an E in there at the end, S-L-A-V-E-S. Yeah. The Slavs are white, lily white people, just like me, right? They're the whitest of the white. They're translucent white. That's how white they are, right? Yeah. That's what the name slaves, that's where the word slaves come from. Because there were so many Slavic slaves, so many white slaves, that we actually named slaves after white people. But somehow white people are responsible for slavery. Is this insane? So white people fought and died in the Civil War and the Revolutionary War to get America started and get slavery abolished, right? And then they set out across the entire world to get rid of it. And back before the white people died and fought to get rid of slavery, most slaves were, so much white that they were named after Slavs. But somehow, white people were responsible for slavery. Even though every country right now that does have slavery is all black or Middle Eastern, whatever color that is. Yeah. So, what the... And, what's funny is America is one of the few countries that never enslaved anyone, really. And I'm sure there was a couple of people that were enslaved. But we bought slaves. Africa enslaved black people. Okay, we bought the slaves off of the blacks that enslaved the black people of Africa. Same way with the white slaves. We didn't enslave the Irish. The English people enslaved the Irish, and then we bought the slaves from them, or they were coming over here and they brought their white slaves with them. Same with Asian slaves. We didn't, the Asian slaves were mainly, they were the very few, compared to the other skin colors, and then whites, and then of course the blacks were the most. But the Asians, the rich people, came over along with the poor Asian people, and the rich ones brought some of their slaves, you know what I mean? Because slavery was rampant through the entire world since the beginning of time, okay? And the last thing I say about this is, 12.5% of white people own slaves, 3% of black people own slaves, 1% of Asians own slaves, or actually probably like 0.5%. But yet, even though it's the highest number is 12.5%, we blame that 12.5%. Let me bring up one other thing here, is that that in every country, in every culture, in every society, from the beginning in time, on the entire globe, on the entire earth, since mankind has existed, okay, every person that was a slaver, meaning every person that owned slaves, they all had one thing in common, and it wasn't their skin color. Because skin color, if you go by skin color, all the skin colors were just as evil. Right? There's only one thing that they have in common. All these people that own slaves, they were the elites. But we don't blame the elites. We never blame. They're always the ones doing it. But we blame the Jews, even though they're not all rich, so they can't be. Half of the Jews in the world are living in Israel. Okay, what is this, like a third world country over there? They live in the freaking desert, for God's sakes. It's the same way with white people. The poorest white city. The poorest city in this country is white. The top 10 poorest cities, half of them are white. If you look at the average medium income for all the different whatevers, blacks are down there kind of at the bottom, man, almost either at the bottom or like 1 or 2 up. But whites are in the middle. There's like 10 groups above us and 10 groups below us. How are we the freaking powerhouse? Just because a small percentages of the white people are rich, and they just like the patriarchy. You got in the whole history of this world, 40% of men have never had sex. Never! Or else they went to a hooker. Now, put it this way, 40% didn't procreate. And think about it, you're living back in a little house in the prairie days. They didn't have hookers galore, you know what I mean? So that means, what kind of patriarchy is it if 40% of the men don't get to procreate? That's not a patriarchy, you morons. That's the elites. But no one will ever blame the elites. I don't know why you do that. Why can't you just blame them?